£300,000 for Boris Johnson's lies at the time. So it's kind of unfair.
Well, OK, if the sequencing upsets you, fine, we could try and sequence it and get to it later, but we still got... Do you agree that it's still got to be reached? It's still got to be that someone who broke the rules is fined for breaking them?
They broke the rules, but nobody's going to mention the theft on a grand scale. They'll hit up someone like that because they know they'll get the money back because they don't have enough money to pay lawyers to kick. But
that's not a reason to not do it.
It's not a reason to not do it, but it's a justification for not paying it. Why are you not fining these people? But you're fining me.
What about included in that Boris Johnson?
Well, as the fellow said before, that's not going to hurt Boris Johnson very much, and we are paying his lawyer's fees for telling lies at that time, which is much more than a COVID fine. We're paying close to $300,000 now for Boris Johnson's lawyer fees. $5,000 is a drop in the ocean, really. Well,
for someone he's given the speeches that he'd been doing recently, I guess it would be. Dan, I appreciate the call. Thank you very much indeed. Text here on 84850. Tom, we were listening to your show on our way back from school. My two boys of Year 5 and Year 3, so Year 3, my son's in Year 3, so 7 and 8, Year 5 is 9 and 10, were eager to listen to the question. As soon as you started reading the first paragraph, my Year 3 boy gave the answer, as heart beating fast and second way trying to calm herself. I can tell you that it was not a difficult question. It's just that some parents exaggerate things. What you think that the parents are saying, he cried all over the place. He hated that test. It was too hard. It was too hard. But yet your 7-year-old got it. Tom's a new caller in Braintree. Tom.
Hi. Yeah, I wanted to add something to the discussion around the SATs papers. I've been teaching myself for 17, 18 years now. And my feeling, and I'm not alone here, I think, when it comes to the SATs, is that maths is quite easy to measure in a test.
Yeah.
It's not debatable.
My children are obviously in school and at that kind of age. Split diagraphs. I'd never heard of a split diagraph before helping my children learn to read and write. And I've got no idea. What was it again, Tom? An implied verb?
An implied verb.
Right, that's next question. If our very clever 11-year-old is still listening, what is, please, an implied verb? Tom, thank you very much indeed for the call. You're listening to Tom Swarbrick on LBC. These are the headlines at 5 o'clock.
One of the topics of conversation I'll be having with my fellow leaders is about the longer-term security agreements that we put in place for Ukraine.
The UK says it's leading the way with new sanctions on Russia as it introduces a ban on Russian diamonds.
The people who perpetrated this evil deed have no support in Northern Ireland.
2 people arrested over the attempted murder of a senior police officer in Northern Ireland.
The read across is relatively limited for investors, but that will depend on how swiftly they are able to tie up a permanent successor.
Tesco's chairman stepping down next month after claims he was inappropriate towards women. And
what I can tell you is I want to bring the numbers of legal net migration down.
Rishi Sunak vows to bring down net migration, but refuses to say by how much. Is that a problem? We'll discuss after the news.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 5 o'clock. The war in Ukraine will be the top of the agenda at this year's G7 summit in Japan. Volodymyr Zelensky is reportedly due to arrive in Hiroshima over the weekend after addressing the Arab League earlier. But world leaders will also discuss the regulation of artificial intelligence. Dr. Neil Saunders is an AI expert at the University of Greenwich and has told LBC there are a number of issues which need to be considered.
We don't really know what these AI systems are capable of. Because of the lack of regulation, we don't really know when we're talking to an AI or when we're not. It's very difficult to predict what the G7 will actually come up with. But one thing that a lot of people are calling for, even the CEO of OpenAI, they're calling for AI to be watermarked. So people actually know that they're dealing with an AI and not a human being.
A 35-year-old man behind a website which helped criminals to con people out of more than £100 million has been jailed for 13 years. TJ Fletcher's site allowed them to disguise phone numbers so they appeared to come from trusted organisations like banks. iSpoof was brought down last year. A man has died after being attacked by a dog in Greater Manchester. Armed police were called to an area of Lee last night and one man has been arrested. LBC's Jacob Waters has more.
Just after 9 p.m. last night, police were called to Westley Lane. There they found a 37-year-old man with serious injuries and a dog that was dangerously out of control. He was taken to hospital but died in the early hours of this morning. Greater Manchester police say they tried to calm the dog down but ultimately had to kill it.
Tesco has announced its chairman will step down next month despite finding no evidence of wrongdoing. John Allen has denied 3 allegations of inappropriate behaviour and apologised over a 4th accusation. The supermarket claims his behaviour is at risk of becoming a distraction. And the Metropolitan Police has urged people not to intervene with climate activists blocking roads during demonstrations. A video posted on social media shows a Just Stop Oil protester being thrown to the ground during one in central London. Campaigners were slow marching in front of traffic near to the Tower of London earlier. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 14 points at 77.56. The pound buys $1.24 and €1.15. LBC weather, some patchy rain for Scotland and Northern Ireland tonight with cloud building. Becoming drier for England and Wales with clear skies, lows of 5. A largely sunny day tomorrow for England and Wales. Cloudier with patches of rain for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Highs of 20 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Tom Swarbrick.
Very good afternoon to you. 4 minutes past 5 the time. Just before 6, we will, of course, bring you Simon Mark's American Week and we'll tell you how you could get money off your mortgage. Plus, there is still a row and possibly even some tears about the SATS questions. Details to come. First, after Rishi Sunak gave his first speech of this year, we fell on air that day to explain that Rishi Sunak fundamentally is stuck. He's hemmed in. He has a cabinet where splits now over fundamental policies are beginning to emerge, certainly publicly, the policies that will probably decide the outcome of the next election. He can't get away with eliding over inconsistencies and incoherences that Boris Johnson was able to. He promised transparency and honesty. He allows Suella Braverman in the main to say the kind of things he seems uncomfortable with himself, but that keeps the head-banging Nat Conconf part of the Conservative Party happy, while not going gung-ho on the culture war stuff. On migration, he is also a bit stuck. Hemmed in by the manifesto pledge to cut migration back to around 200,000, when it's running at more than double that, but cognizant that the UK is very, very reliant on foreign workers and students. How reliant? Well, according to the Nuffield Trust today, a fifth of the UK's nursing, midwifery and nursing association workforce originally trained overseas. The Times reports that the government have been warned that those numbers are unsustainable. Senior NHS leaders fear the health service could be left in a precarious position if increased competition results in nurses choosing alternative destinations, resulting in a shortfall for the UK. We are going to need to train more nurses, but of course that takes time. So what happens to that net migration number in the short term? What are Rishi Sunak's intentions? Yesterday, we reported that the Prime Minister had signalled that he wouldn't be fulfilling that pledge made in 2019, and today seemed to signal that he would tolerate net migration of around double that 200,000 figure, saying he did, though, want legal migration to drop below £500,000. And just before we play you the clip, no, Beth Rigby is not in the shower with Rishi Sunak.
My clear goal is to reduce the levels of legal net migration, whilst at the same time focusing relentlessly on stopping illegal migration, and that's why one of my 5 priorities is to stop the boats. We know that numbers are too high, and I want to bring them down. I've been very clear that my goal is to bring those numbers down.
Let's unpack it a bit, because back in 2019, the government promised to cut net migration. At the time, it was 226,000. It's gone up. It was 504,000 last year. Will it go down next year?
Oh, well, just on the numbers last year, if you actually look at that release that was put out, it's very clear that there are a set of factors which led to those numbers, including, for example, Ukrainian refugees, which are included in those numbers. So I think we need to treat a little bit of caution.
Also high numbers of foreign workers and student visas as well.
Yeah, but there are also a set of unique circumstances relating to our refugee programmes for bringing Ukrainian refugees here. Well, look, I'm not going to preempt what the future numbers are, but what I can tell you is I want to bring the numbers of legal net migration down.
I'm interested in the politics of this because, again, he does seem a bit stuck. He's stuck because he might think that a 500,000 net migration figure is right, but has to explain to people that he believes want it to fall more, and they've been told that, you know, it would be any version of tens of thousands to 200,000, why he thinks it should be higher. He's worried that you would think that, one, he's broken a promise, and two, that you would think he's not that worried about high migration, and you are worried about high migration. How worried are you by high migration? It's about 500,000, record levels already, it's going to go up, and what could Sunak say to you to reassure you that he really does want to bring legal migration down, even though after 13 years, net migration has increased sort of exponentially, and the whole time, various Conservative Prime Ministers have said that they would cut it back. How bad for the Tories is that? If he came out and said, we need net migration at about 500,000 a year for the next few years to keep the economy ticking over, would you vote for him? If he said, I'm going to stick to the manifesto pledge of 2019 to get net migration down to 200,000, come what may for the economy, would you vote for him? 0345 6060 973, because where he is now is, again, stuck. James Johnson is co-founder of the polling company JL Partners, was previously the government's senior opinion researcher when Theresa May was Prime Minister. Thanks for coming on again, James. What do you make of the politics of where Rishi Sunak seems to be on this?
Well, I think your analysis there is right, and I think that Rishi Sunak is right to be worried about how voters might respond to that. 6 in 10 of the British public say that they think immigration has been too high over the last 10 years. And people, although they are worried about illegal immigration, they're also worried about the amount of legal immigration, whether that's the impact on their communities, whether it's the impact on housing, the NHS, or indeed opportunities for British workers. So there's real frustrations and worries out there. And if the Conservatives don't have that clear, not only a pledge, but clear plan to reduce those numbers, then he could well be in trouble.
And that's because, as you say, the 6 in 10 who are worried, have they got a number in mind about what they would be less worried by?
Well, I don't think it's 500,000. And I think that's
going up.
Indeed, and I think that's going to be a concern. Look, voters aren't, necessarily have a target number. They just want it to be at what they feel is a sensible level. But that is certainly nowhere near that number. When I was running the polling in number 10, we actually tested this. We put to the public in polling the then tens of thousands figure, and asked people whether they supported or opposed that being a target to reduce to. And people opposed that target. Not because it was unrealistic, because they thought it was too high. So tens of thousands was seen as too high. So, look, I think it's going to be a bit of an uphill struggle selling 500,000 to the voters.
And there's no world in which he can tell those voters, 6 in 10 of whom, as you say, want those numbers down, there's no world in which he can tell them, look, despite the promises of the last 13 years, actually it is in your interests economically for this many people to be coming to the country to work and study.
So, look, as someone who does polling and talks about the public, I'm always keen to say, politicians should not just do what the polling says. Politicians can lead the public, but immigration is one of those rare ones where it's actually quite hard for them to do so because people feel passionate about it. They feel that politicians have been out of touch with them for some time anyway. And, like you say, they also feel like it's something the Conservatives have been promising for so long. So I don't think he's got much wriggle room on this.
And the idea of not being able to commit to anything now presumably is because, James, a year or so out from an election, there's a lot going on behind the scenes to work out, well, what are we going to say?
Yeah, of course, and he's going to be balancing and thinking about a lot of things. But the key number, I think, is when you look across the country and you ask people whether they feel that immigration has undermined or enriched Britain over the last 10 years, it's about 50-50. But when you apply it to constituencies and you look across the country in seats in a way that the politicians will be thinking about next year, actually 75% of constituencies say that it's tended to undermine rather than enrich. So, when you're a politician, that's the number you're thinking about. And going into an election on that, it's got to be one of their key pledges, or I think they're going to be in real trouble and they'll lose their edge against Labour.
Really good to talk to you as always. James, thank you. James Johnson, co-founder of the polling company JL Partners. Khaled is in Leicester. What should you say, Khaled? Hi.
Hi, Tom. I think the thing is, look, I think there's too much scaremongering. I think this tactic has been used time and time again by the government. When they want to bring any rules or regulations into place, or they want to, there's an agenda which we don't know about behind the scenes, then they scare the public into submission to accepting whatever rules and regulations, whatever laws they want to bring about. We've had migration for as far as I can remember. The migration is always going to take place. But the thing is, many times economic migration, many times we've dealt in countries like Iran, Russia,